Barack Obama is the first U.S. president to visit Burma. It was part of a trip to Asia meant to reinforce Washington's so-called Asia pivot, which has raised concerns in Beijing about U.S. influence in the region.
Our VOA State Department correspondent Scott Stearns has been on this story, and I sat down with Scott for the backstory. Let's start by taking a look at the top of his report on the president's visit.
U.S. officials say President Obama's visit recognizes the decision by Burmese leaders to embark on a path of reform and democratization after decades of repression. Tom Donilon, President Obama's national security advisor, says the president believes engagement is the best way to encourage further reforms.
There's a lot more to be done, and we're not going to miss this moment in terms of our opportunity to push this along and to try to lock in as much reform and lock in this path forward as best we can.
Scott, the historic trip that President Obama recently took to Burma, which is the first of any president so far, analysts are talking about how it could be seen as an example of the U.S. pivot in Asia. How much do you agree with that?
I think China certainly sees it as part of the U.S. pivot to Asia, and that's of concern to Beijing. They've been unhappy with pretty much all aspects of the Obama administration's repositioning, rebalancing, sometimes they call it, of diplomatic, military, and commercial assets to Asia.
The idea is to persuade the Chinese that the American rebalancing is good for China.
Michael Pillsbury is a senior fellow at the Hudson Institute who worked for former Presidents Ronald Reagan and George Herbert Walker Bush. He says Chinese leaders see the Burma visit as further evidence of U.S. deception about the aims of its Asia pivot.
But the U.S. is portrayed basically to Chinese youth and to Chinese university students, and I'm afraid to Chinese officials, as a very crafty, dangerous, highly coordinated, ruthless, cunning power that in many ways China would like to emulate.
Secretary Clinton has gone to some extent to say that the United States has always been a Pacific power. This isn't anything new, but that as the United States disengages from conflicts in Iraq and Afghanistan, it sees time to re-engage in Asia. To my mind, the Burma situation exists outside of that, as the rapprochement is geared more by the reforms that are going on inside Burma. But as those two things happen concurrently, I think the Chinese have definitely made a link between the pivot and Burma.
But do you think the Chinese see it as an effort by the U.S. to leverage a new relationship with Burma against China?
Yes. I think that the Chinese are unsettled by pretty much all of the U.S. action in Asia, and specifically to Burma. Professor Zhanlan Jin chairs international affairs studies at Shanghai's Fudan University.
Every move American government is taking, including Obama's visit to Burma, is now, you're right, they're clearly taken as a geostrategic move. It's not something promoting Myanmar democracy, or that's not even the issue here. The issue is try to win Myanmar, Burma away.
We hear a lot of politicians talk about Burma. What do you think is the sense on the ground in terms of the people? What are they asking for?
There's certainly a lot of enthusiasm, especially among Aung San Suu Kyi's supporters and the political opposition in Burma, that this is an opportunity to really make political and economic changes as she takes her seat in Parliament, as this new Parliament moves toward some greater economic liberalization. But, it is some great unknowns. The reasons for the beginning of this opening by the Burmese are still not entirely clear. So it's difficult to know what might reverse that.
And thanks again to Scott Stearns, VOA correspondent at the State Department.